From space, the Sahara looks timeless, a sea of sand and stone stretching wider than the United States. But here's the twist. The Sahara isn't just sitting there. It's moving, not like the dunes in the wind, but like a boundary, a shifting line between survival and collapse. Because along the Sahara's southern edge lies the Sahel, a thin strip of land where millions farm, graze, and live on the edge of the map. And in the past century, that edge has been shifting. So today we ask a simple question with huge consequences. Why is the Sahara Desert expanding? In the next few minutes, you will see the Sahara in a way you have probably never seen it. Not as a place, but as a climate machine. Welcome to the channel where Africa's stories take center stage. From politics and business to culture and the untold narratives shaping the continent. If it matters to Africa, we discuss it. My name is always KBA Japan, and I welcome you to yet another episode. Let's dive in. First, let's map the problem. The Sahara covers most of North Africa, spanning from the Atlantic coast across Algeria, Libya, and Egypt, all the way to the Red Sea. But the Sahara isn't defined by dunes, it's defined by dryness. So scientists often draw its boundary using rainfall, where precipitation drops below desert level thresholds. Now here's the key. That boundary doesn't stay still. In summer, the West African monsoon pushes rain northward. In winter, dry air dominates. So the Sahara breathes every year. But over decades, the breathing can become a drift. This is what people mean by the Sahara is expanding. The zone meeting desert-like conditions is getting larger, especially along the southern edge where the Sahel begins. To understand the Sahara, you have to zoom out beyond Africa to the entire planet. Earth has a system of moving air currents that decides where rain falls and where it doesn't. Warm air rises near the equator, it travels north and south at high altitude, and then it sinks in the subtropics. When air sinks, it warms and dries out. Clouds disappear, rain struggles to form. That's why the world's major deserts, the Sahara, the Arabian Desert, the desert of Australia, sit in a broad band around the globe. So here's the issue. As the planet warms, this circulation can change. In some patterns, the dry belt can widen or shift, meaning the regions near the Sahara's edge may experience desert conditions more often. And when you add heat, you don't just change rainfall, you change evaporation. Hotter air pulls more moisture from soil and plants. So even if rainfall stays similar, the land can become effectively drier. So driver number one is the planet climate engine tilting the odds towards dryness at the margins. But if driver number one is the background, driver number two is the trigger. If you want to understand why the Sahara expands southwards, you have to understand the Sahel's rain, because the Sahel survives on a short wet season, a narrow season where the monsoon climbs north and delivers the water that feeds crops, grassland, and livestock. But that monsoon is sensitive, not just to African heat, but to ocean temperatures. When parts of the Atlantic warm or cool in certain patterns, they can weaken the monsoon. And when the monsoon weakens, rain falls further south. That means the desert boundary drawn by rainfall shifts with it. And history gives us the clearest example. In the 1970s and 1980s, the Sahel experienced one of the most devastating drought periods of the 20th century. Rainfall collapsed over multiple years. Millions were affected. This is where the idea of the Sahara marching south entered global consciousness. But it wasn't the sun marching, it was rainfall failing. Driver number two is ocean-driven variability, the Atlantic and global seas pulling the strings of rainfall. And that's terrifying because ocean cycles can swing again. Even if some years look better, the system can flip. But there's a third driver that makes everything worse. Climate sets the stage, ocean controls the rain, but humans can push fragile land over the edge. Along the Sahara's margins, land degradation happens when grazing becomes too intense for grass to recover. Trees are cut faster than they regrow, and soils lose cover and crack. And then the wind erodes what remains. When vegetation disappears, the ground heats faster, less moisture stays in the soil, dust rises, and once land degrades, it doesn't just suffer drought, it magnifies drought. This doesn't mean humans created the Sahara's problem, but it does mean that land management can decide how fast the margins deteriorate and how hard it is for us to recover it. So the Sahara's expansion story is not one story. It's three forces stacking together. The shifting dry belt plus heat-driven aridity, ocean cycles shaping Sahel rainfall, and land degradation amplifying dryness locally. Now here's where it gets even more complex. You may have heard another claim that parts of the Sahel are greening. And yes, some regions have shown vegetation recovery since the drought decades. So how can the Sahara expand while some places get greener? This is because Africa's dry lands are not one uniform landscape. They are mosaic. Rain can recover in one zone and collapse in another. Vegetation can increase in some areas while degraded land keeps failing nearby. And the desert boundary can expand in one season and shrink in another. So the question isn't, is Africa drying or greening? The question is, where, when, and for whom? Because the consequences aren't abstract. This moving boundary is a human story. When the Sahara's edge shifts south, the Sahel gets squeezed. That means crops fail more easily, grazing routes collapse, water becomes a bargaining chip, food prices rise, migration accelerates, and tensions flare where livelihoods overlap. The Sahara doesn't just expand into empty land, it expands into space where people are trying to live. Whilst we're here, let's talk about a place that used to be a giant blue landmark on Africa's map and is now shrinking before our eyes. At the western edge of the Sahel lies Lake Chad, once Africa's largest lakes, supporting fishing, trade, and millions of lives. But in just a few decades, it has dramatically contracted. And as the water disappears, so does stability, and conflict rises in the vacuum. It's revealing how fragile life can be on the edge of the Sahara. If you are new here on the channel, kindly do well to subscribe and to tap the bell notification icon to receive instant notification for when next an episode is uploaded. Thank you so much for joining me and see you on the next episode.